At your baptism, God declares, "You are my child, my beloved." And this is the message that you get before there's any achievement or any work or any certificates or degrees. It's the central reality of your life, that you are a child of God and beloved. In the life of Jesus, there's a beautiful moment where he's out in the desert by a river with his relative John, and Jesus is baptized, and he too receives this message of belovedness from God. It's before his public ministry has begun and before the miracles and the teachings and the crowds. Immediately after receiving this message and being baptized, here's what happens. This is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, 'One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.'" Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, 'He will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone.'" Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, 'Do not put the Lord your God to the test.'" Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, "All these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, 'Worship the Lord your God and serve only him.'" Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. In the desert, Jesus meets the depth of his humanity, his limitation, and his vulnerability. He's hungry, and not even just hungry, he's famished. At the conclusion of it all, he's waited on by angels, presumably because he's so weak. The weird thing is, he's led into all of this by the Spirit. So what does that mean? We have, as part of our religious tradition, a long history of replicating situations like the one that Jesus is in here by taking times to fast or to pray or to give something up or to get away from the normal routines in which we live. In the present day, some of us choose to do this by going somewhere else to meet God, like a retreat or a workshop or the beach. The intention behind these practices and these trips is usually to experience some sort of shift. We're here in our lives, but we don't want to be here. So we create an intentional and on purpose in-between space to help us get to the next thing. Perhaps we're seeking discernment or trying to break a destructive pattern. Or maybe we're seeking simply to commune more deeply with God or understand the self better. But sometimes we don't have to go anywhere or do anything on purpose to replicate this kind of desert experience. Life brings times like this to us, whether we like it or not. And usually we don't like it. What can happen is you're sometimes just living your life and there's a shift in the world around you or the people around you. And because of that, you are thrown into a new reality that you don't have a map for. It can happen between jobs, like when one ends and you didn't want it to end and you don't know when the next one will begin yet. Or when you know a job should end, but you're not ready to leave. It can happen when there's a shift in household dynamics, like when someone moves away or when a baby is born. These are always situations without a map because no two households are the same and no two people are the same, and you can never do it exactly like someone else has. I found myself thinking at times, okay, this is my reality, and I see that, but what I really want is for it to look like that over there. But I don't know what road to take to get there, or maybe there isn't a road that I know of. But even worse is at times when I've had to think, this is the reality I'm living in, and I want it to change, but I don't know in what way. I just know I don't want it to be like this. How on earth do you find a map for a journey whose destination you don't know yet? The level of discomfort it's possible to experience when we stay in one place, waiting for what's next, is astounding. And I know some of you have felt that this year because of the pandemic, but we are also all living our lives too, so there's a good chance that you've dealt with a range of these situations on top of the pandemic. Stuck in one place between what was before and what will come next is right where the Spirit leads Jesus when Jesus is led into the wilderness. And I'm frankly not surprised what happens when he's there. While stuck in one place, he's buffeted by the winds of temptation. Questions are thrown at him by the one who's come to test him, to see if he will leave, or to see if he will be thrown off his center. But he stays. Assured of his belovedness at his baptism and his value to God, he knows who he is, and he knows who God is. And he declines all the offers he gets to miraculously exit himself from the situation into which the Spirit has led him. It's the situation of being human. He's hungry, but he will not command the stones to become loaves of bread. Instead, he will rely on the words coming from the mouth of God. You are my beloved. He's taken to the highest point of the holy city at the top of the temple, but he will not throw himself off so that he can be rescued by messengers of God. Instead, he will trust that he should stay wherever God has taken him. He's offered an opportunity to reverse injustice against his people by taking control of every political nation and using political power, which usually comes through violence. The only caveat, of course, to this ability to reverse centuries of injustice and have this level of control is that in doing so, he will not be doing what God has called him to do. And he refuses. Instead, he will worship and serve God alone. He stays. And God gives him the sustenance he needs to stay. Angels are sent to wait on him. It's the humanity of Jesus that he doesn't try to power his way out of vulnerability, but instead accepts the help offered. We often think of the rescue of God as being a secret trap door that God uses to lead us out. But sometimes it's the sustenance needed to stay right in the middle. I wonder, what if we accepted the normalcy of that liminal space between one reality and the next? Despite the body's signals of uncomfortability that can come up, what if we accepted that these in-between spaces and stuck spaces and spaces without a map aren't actually wrong? They're human. And they're places that if we follow Jesus and if we're human, which we all are, we'll be led to eventually. It would be easier to flee the difficulty. And that's the temptation that Jesus finds himself dealing with. it would be easier to not be so vulnerable. And it would probably in some ways feel really good and feel really safe to use his own power to dominate his way out of that in-between space and out of that situation of being in need. And that option is actually one that many of us use to avoid uncomfortable in-between spaces. We can, if we want to, use all of our energy to try to get out of what we don't like, usually at the expense of our relationships and our self. Or we can use all of our energy to try to avoid that uncomfortable reality that we don't like. I wonder, as I offer these examples, what's coming to mind in you about the ways that you try to get out of or avoid the places that you've been led to. We often talk about spirituality or the Christian life or even just life as a journey. And sometimes it is. But other times on that journey that often contains movement, we are invited to stop and to stay. Jesus' secret to stopping and staying is to trust that God brought him there. The Spirit led him to that place. To try to barrel our way out of it or to avoid it is to not trust. But to stay is to trust. I know that there's a definition that some of us carry for this phrase of trusting God. And we think of trusting God as believing a specific idea. And I think there's something to that. But as I read the story, I notice how Jesus only needs to trust God in the first place because he is, in fact, in need. What if trusting God means first accepting that you would need to trust anyone outside yourself in the first place? It begins with accepting that you need help so that you can ask for it and receive it. It's incredible how serious the attempts are to direct Jesus away from the place he's been led by the Spirit. But Jesus holds fast to the center. He says, "One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." And just as you might be wondering, but which words? Let me remind you that the words that Jesus heard from the mouth of God in the sentence before this story starts are the words spoken at his baptism. "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." Jesus trusts that voice, and so he stays. The God he worships is the one who calls him beloved, and that's the center. When you're in the uncomfortable in-between, what if instead of directing all your energy into trying to projectile yourself out, you directed your attention to the center, the voice that names you beloved, to the God who's brought you there in the first place? After staying still for the appointed time, Jesus moves on to a very full and active vocation, although he continues to take time to get away. The stillness between his baptism and the beginning of his work wasn't an obstacle. It, in itself, was part of the path. Sometimes on the journey, there's just an X marks the spot and the instruction to stay here a while for an unspecified amount of time. And then there will be something else. You don't know what it is yet, but you do know that right here is where you're supposed to be. You know that you are loved and help is on the way.